days after she was first arrested, Teesta Setalvad, well-known activist, has finally got interim bail from the Supreme Court of India. It is being considered as a very crucial case and a very crucial granting of bail because it was the Supreme Court's own judgment and observations which prodded the Gujarat police and the anti-terror department of the Gujarat police to arrest the 60-year-old activist nearly 2 months ago. So what is this case all about? And why is this being hailed as an important judgment by one end of the spectrum? Why is another end of the spectrum today saying that Teesta Setalvad has got special treatment which she doesn't deserve? Now, we know that most debates in our country, most issues are very polarized, but what we're aiming to do today on Beyond the Headline is break down what the story is actually about and what the larger picture is here. So let me begin by telling you what happened. It was about 2 months ago that Teesta Setalvad and B.R. Srikumar, a former DGP of Gujarat, was arrested by the Gujarat police. This was pertaining to a number of cases filed against them over the years, which alleged that they had falsified evidence, especially in Teesta Setalvad's case. The accusation is that she had falsified evidence, that she had even embezzled funds meant for charity. So here we need to understand who exactly Teesta Setalvad is. Teesta Setalvad is a well-known activist and she's best known for her work with the victims of the post-Godhra riots in 2002. Prominently among them was Zakia Jafri, the widow of Ehsan Jafri, a Congress MP who was butchered and murdered by a mob in those riots. So Teesta Setalvad has been helping all of these victims all over the years with their legal process, etc. And over these years, the accusations also piled up that she had forced witnesses to sign evidence which was incorrect, that she had used money given to her charitable organization to help riot victims for other purposes, and hence there was diversion of funds. And this sort of standoff between Teesta Setalvad and the Gujarat government over the years has continued. Then comes the Supreme Court order where it points out that a few people, and Teesta Setalvad is named in it, have been keeping the pot stirring and have been up to mischief. That's when Teesta Setalvad gets arrested. So what did the Supreme Court say today while granting her interim bail? The Supreme Court made a couple of observations and I'm just, compressing it down for you. Prominently among them was the fact that she's a woman who has not been given bail for over 2 months, and that should be kept in mind. The charges against her are all the kind of offences which under the IPC can be given bail. And yesterday in its observations, the Supreme Court also asked the Gujarat High Court a number of questions, including why they were taking so much time to hear her bail plea. The Gujarat High Court has not yet given her a date for the bail plea. It's in fact a date in September. And on the basis of this delay is why Teesta Setalvad approached the Supreme Court. So while this story and this headline today that you're reading is all about Teesta Setalvad, but we want to use this opportunity to dig a little deeper. Because yes, Teesta Setalvad wasn't under trial. The Supreme Court observed that the Gujarat police had 7 days of police custody with her, so they could have asked her whatever they wanted to pertaining to the accusation against her. Hence, there was no need for extension of her custody and interim bail was granted. But do you know how many under trials are there in our country? According to the Supreme Court's own observation, nearly 2/3 of prisoners in this country are under trials. What do I mean when I say under trials? People who don't have a charge sheet against them, who are awaiting their justice in a court of law. They're just in limbo. They're hanging. And in the year 2021, there were over 4,27,000 such under trials in Indian jails across the country. Now, if you go into the statistics, it shows you how big the problem really is. Because between 2021 and 2020, you saw nearly 15% in the increase in under trials. And most of them, more than half of them, spend at least 3 months in jail. So relatively, some could argue that Teesta Setalvad, because she's a celebrity under trial, there's a lot of media focus on her case, got preferential treatment. We have to talk about the issue today with two aspects. One is that was the process as punishment, which happens in Indian law because it just takes so much time to come to the end of that process. Was that used against Teesta Setalvad and others? And secondly, what can be done to improve the plight of under trials? To speak on this, I'm joined first by Dushyant Dave. He's a senior advocate. Thank you so much, Mr. Dave, for joining us today on Beyond the Headline. Let me begin by just getting your perspective on what the Supreme Court has said today. And at one point, they say that the final decision on bail still rests with the Gujarat High Court. What the Supreme Court has said today need not influence the decision of the Gujarat High Court. So how do we understand this? Is the ball still in the court of the Gujarat High Court?
Well, I haven't seen the order, but it could be with the Gujarat High Court. But the fact of the matter is that Teesta has been released on bail, whether it's interim or final, it doesn't matter, because every day's detention of Teesta Setalvad was absolutely unconstitutional. It was immoral, and it was certainly the worst abuse of human rights, in this country. And I am so happy that Supreme Court has actually done a course correction, because it was a sad judgment from the Supreme Court by the bench presided by Justice Khanvilkar, which led to her arrest. So I think it's extraordinary that Supreme Court has intervened. And it's really, I would say, disgusting that this poor lady, who has done remarkable work for mankind, she had to spend such a long time in jail thanks to the subordinate judiciary and the Gujarat High Court, to which I belong. And I am deeply saddened by the approach of the subordinate judiciary. She should have been released on the first day. So I think what is really important is that Teesta is out, and that really speaks volume for the Supreme Court. It speaks volume for those who fought for Teesta, Mr. Kapil Sibal, Mr. Uzaif Ahmadi, and the entire team. I think I heartily congratulate them for remarkable work that they did and to stand up for this kind of injustice. So I think overall, it is a powerful message that Supreme Court has given to the executive that we will not allow this to continue. It may have continued in the past, but no longer.
In your view, why is this particular case so important? Is it because Teesta's arrest was prompted by the Supreme Court's own observations in the first place?
Yes, absolutely right. And that's why I said that judgment was really, not only shocking, but that judgment from the Supreme Court, especially Justice Khanvilkar's bench, was, I would say, horrifying. I mean, here is somebody who from the civil society is working to help the victims of the riots. You see, fact of the matter is that riots did take place. Fact of the matter is that more than 2,000 innocent men, women, and children died. Now, nobody can say that the Godhra, perpetrators should not be proceeded with. They must be. But the police, therefore, had a greater duty to ensure that peace prevailed in Gujarat after the Godhra incident. Instead, large-scale violence was allowed to take place. Now, nobody can say that it was a conspiracy on the part of, Chief Minister Mr. Modi, as he then was. But the fact of the failure of his police is absolutely, writ large on the face of it. And for that, if somebody like Teesta and others were helping, you can't just, send them to jail. You have to applaud their effort. She deserves a Padma Bhushan. You can't just do this kind of a thing. We are a civilized society. We are not Myanmar, where activists are killed. We are not China. We are India. We respect, we are a democracy. We are a vibrant democracy, as, Prime Minister himself talks about it time and again. So to my mind, the Supreme Court's order, the observations were not only uncalled for, but I would say they were the saddest in the history of Supreme Court in recent times. And I am terribly, I would say, disappointed and somewhat disgusted by those observations.
Let me look at it from the other point of view, Mr. Dave. Shouldn't the allegations against Teesta be investigated? I know she's a prominent human rights activist, and this whole case has been seen in, from the point of view of Gujarat government versus Teesta Setalvad. But if you look at the allegations themselves, those of falsifying evidence, those of embezzlement of funds, aren't they serious enough to warrant an investigation by the Gujarat police?
Listen, these charges are being brought routinely now against anybody and everybody who is opposed to this government. Every critic, every opposition leader is facing charges today, as if everybody, who is involved with BJP and their allies and their friends are God's gift to mankind. So, it's easy for this government to run after people, and they have been running. Teesta Setalvad is not the kind of a person who would embezzle funds of anybody. I mean, the amount of sheer time and energy and her peace of mind that she has invested in helping, innocent people itself is unbelievable. You can put all kinds of charges, but those charges have no legs to stand. Let me tell you one thing. As I said, look, ultimately, the government of Mr. Modi miserably failed in quelling the riots. And when people, started questioning why that failure took place, they started, going after anybody and everybody. So it was similar to what happened in 1984 in, all over India during the Sikh riots. For political parties, minorities are dispensable. And when, therefore, somebody comes to their help, people in power are just going to run after them. They don't want anybody to help, the victims. Because they want to put a complete, cloud over it. They want to shove everything under the carpet. So I don't think these charges, look, what is the charge? That she defamed Gujarat. What is this charge? I don't understand. In fact, Gujarat defamed itself by not taking immediate measures to protect a sizable minority in the state. That itself is, according to me, a blot on Gujarat. Gujarat police should have acted. I personally know of failures of many police officers whom I had spoken at that point of time to help friends. And they pleaded helplessness. So I don't think it is right for anybody to, I would say that time has come for Mr. Modi and Mr. Amit Shah to put these things behind and forget about it. She tried to help them. It is important now to, bring an end to it, because everybody who was involved has been freed by trial court, thanks to weak judiciary, thanks to the appointment of special public prosecutors who were sympathetic to the cause of the government at that point of time. And none of these cases have been really brought up before the High Court and Supreme Court. So, let's put an end to it now. Let's move forward to ensure that such a thing never happens in this country. And if it does happen, the civil society must stand up and defend, the vulnerable sections of the society.
Now, I want to come to the kind of reactions to this particular case. And some of them are, of course, political, but others also argue that Teesta has got preferential treatment because she was in for only 2 months. Like I mentioned in my opening comments, there are over 4 lakh under trials in India today. Over half of them are in jail for at least 3 months, and people languish for years. Shouldn't we also look at that big figure, and what can we do to ensure that prisoners get justice and at least some conclusion? They don't just remain as under trials.
Well, let us face it. Teesta had no place in jail in the first instance. So her detention, her arrest was from the beginning unconstitutional, illegal, and it was most unjust. So there is no question that she should have spent even a day. In fact, on the first day, the trial judge should have released her. If that's the duty of a trial judge, that when somebody innocent is brought before you, you don't send them to jail. And this does not have, in Arnav Goswami, he came straight from the trial court order to Supreme Court, bypassing the High Court, and he got the order immediately. So why is it that people are questioning Teesta's release? Poor lady has spent 2 months in jail, and she should never have. But yes, so far as the plight of the under trials are concerned, the judiciary is definitely answerable. Judiciary has failed. And it is high time that judiciary really wakes up, because, although Chief Justice Lalit has a short period, I have no doubt that this is seriously engaging his attention. He and his colleagues, and after him, Justice Chandrachud, who's going to be Chief Justice for more than 2 years, I have no doubt they have a lot of work to do in this regard. And I hope, trust and pray that they do, because no citizen of this country should spend a single day in jail, because liberty is extraordinarily important. Liberty is part of the constitutional guarantee. Therefore, nobody who is illegally detained should be in jail for a day longer than what he deserves. And merely because judges have no time, or judiciary is inefficient, or judges have no courage to release, accused who are produced before them, although they don't deserve to be jailed, don't release them. So I think there are many factors which are affecting, and I certainly would agree with you that yes, judiciary is answerable, and judiciary should wake up sooner than later. Simultaneously, the government must do something, because it's the police who picks up people, innocent people, and brings them before the judges. So in the first instance, it's the police which is responsible for illegal arrest. And therefore, no policeman is ever, made answerable. Here, of course, they arrested her thanks to the Supreme Court, which itself is a shameful fact. But in most of the cases, today we are seeing in this country that police goes on arresting people without any justification. So I think it's the rule of law really commands that both the investigating agencies, the police and judiciary all work together to solve this problem.
All right, to speak more on this, I'm joined now by retired Justice Dhingra and advocate in the Supreme Court, Colin Gonsalves. Thank you to both of you for joining us today on Beyond the Headline. Justice Dhingra, let me begin with your perspective on this. The Supreme Court yesterday, while making its observations, was quite harsh when talking about how the Gujarat High Court had conducted itself and the time being taken to even listen to the bail plea of Teesta Setalvad. How do you look at the developments today and their importance for jurisprudence?
See, I think Supreme Court forgets its own conduct. The Supreme Court Justice, the Chief Justice and other judges keep giving sermons to the people, and recently our Chief Justice has gone abroad and there stated that in India democracy is not mature. You see, in Supreme Court, it is a court by rich people, influential people, and people which have say, powerful people, by influential people. The persons who get appointed there are only influential people. There is none out of the poor persons or ordinary persons. And it is meant only for rich people, those who have enough money to hire advocates and reach Supreme Court time and again, engaging advocate who charge fee from 7 lakh per hearing to 20 lakh per hearing. So this is the present character of Supreme Court, that it is meant only for rich, meant not for common man. It receives pain waves when some rich or famous person is in jail, but it doesn't receive those pain waves when people are waiting for justice in the jail and suffering jail sentence only because Supreme Court has no time to hear their appeals. They spend their life in jails, and ultimately after 14 or 20 years, they are acquitted by Supreme Court with not even a word of sorriness that we are sorry we did not hear your appeal for such a long period.
I wanted your views on the Teesta Setalvad case, sir. And I just want to clarify that Justice Dhingra's views on the Supreme Court are purely his own. I just want to make that clear. And I asked you for your views on Teesta Setalvad.
You see, Teesta Setalvad, Teesta Setalvad is not an exception. It is general trend of the Supreme Court. You see, a person who can collect money from abroad, can use that money for herself, can engage advocates also for Supreme Court. She can give money for writing articles in Indian newspapers, in a newspaper abroad, put pressure on Supreme Court, but just by creating an atmosphere that look how much injustice is being done to her. Supreme Court forgets that there is injustice being done to common man of this country because Supreme Court has no time left for common man after hearing the PILs and Teesta Setalvads and
okay. I think we're going to the broader issue of the number of under trials in our country, but I think we should focus initially on this particular case. Colin Gonsalves, you want to respond to some of the things Justice Dhingra has said, and you know the point he's making where he says that those who are influential and can afford top lawyers at least get justice from the Supreme Court. What about the rest?
Well, I must say as a beginning that today is a very, very happy day for millions and millions of Indians who realize that one of India's foremost human rights activists, Teesta Setalvad, has been released from jail, who realized that she was being subjected to grave injustice only because she stood up and spoke boldly against the communal riots that took place in Gujarat, which were engineered by the government of Gujarat. She was one of the people who, in the finest traditions of human rights, stood up and spoke the truth to justice. People are scared today to speak out against powerful people, and it must be said to Teesta's credit that she didn't care whether the person was powerful or not. She spoke the truth, and the truth is that the Gujarat riots was one of the most heinous crimes in the history of independent India. I applaud the Supreme Court. I applaud the Supreme Court for quickly releasing her from jail. And I applaud her, the Supreme Court, for not allowing her to remain in jail even for a minute.
Mr. Gonsalves, wasn't it the same Supreme Court that in its June order talked about, you know, the process and proceedings being held against people who kept the pot stirring? And another part of that judgment, they talk about Teesta Setalvad and Mr. Sri Kumar, but it is based on that direction or that observation that the Gujarat police has acted. So it's the same Supreme Court. And this is, you know, I'm just going to take a second here to say this is what confounds me, that people like or dislike what the Supreme Court says, depending on whether it suits what they were hoping would happen. What is happening to jurisprudence then? Mr. Gonsalves, that question for you.
Yes, see, listen, it's not that people like or dislike things depending on what they're hearing. We must understand that in the Supreme Court, like in society, you have judges who are sometimes pro-government, and you have judges who can actually speak up against the government, even though they know that the government is very powerful. So it depends on the judge before whom the case comes. That's the unfortunate reality of things. And the judgment of the Supreme Court, which made all these comments against Teesta, I do believe is a terrible judgment. And I do believe that a time will come when the same Supreme Court will constitute a larger bench and condemn this judgment as being unconstitutional and set it aside. There is a large body of opinion in India, including retired judges and lawyers and so on, who are of the opinion that this judgment is just not sustainable. And therefore, it's not opinion, it's not mere opinion, but it is that it unfortunately came before a bench that delivered a very, very bad, a deplorable judgment.
Justice Dhingra, you know, your response to some of the points that Colin Gonsalves is making and a lot of human rights activists are making, they are citing other people who seem to be challenging. I'll just finish my point, sir. Who seem to be challenging the government and then are, you know, behind bars for one reason or the other and continue to stay there without any charge sheet being filed, without any FR being filed, where the process becomes punishment. Isn't that a concerning trend, sir?
See, is the process punishment only for Teesta Setalvad? Is she an exception? The process for every common man in this country has been made so cumbersome, and mostly by Supreme Court only, by entertaining, you see, petitions even against adjournments. That Supreme Court has become a bail court for rich people. If Mr. Gonsalves remembers, I don't know whether he remembers or not, Mr. Thapar was a businessman arrested at IJI airport. His bail was rejected by ACMM in Delhi. At 12 midnight, Supreme Court judge took up that plea before himself and he granted bail to Mr. Thapar at 12 midnight. You see, these judges are lauded not because they are doing justice, but because they are giving relief to Teestas and Thapars. It is, you see, I am not passing judgment on the, you see, Teesta Setalvad, but I am sorry to say, Mr. Gonsalves doesn't represent millions and millions or billions of people of this country. It is his personal opinion. He should say that he was very happy that Teesta Setalvad got this relief, but not that millions and millions of people of this country got sigh of relief that Teesta Setalvad was very happy. There are millions and millions of people who know how witnesses are fixed against them, how fabricated evidence is collected, how fabricated evidence is generated, and the people are sent to jail. You see, the Supreme Court judgment that the Teesta and Ram Kumar kept pot boiling specifically pointed out to that. And I consider you cannot condemn a judgment because it doesn't suit you. And you can always hope that there will be a better judge or a judge of your liking. I would not say better bench, but a bench of your liking who will reverse the judgment. You can, you see, that is recently Supreme Court had said the advocates are doing bench hopping.
Yeah,
bench
forum shopping.
By just
they call it forum shopping. Yeah, no, I want to get Mr. Gonsalves' response to the point Justice Dhingra is making. Allow me to get a response to the point you're making, sir, which is an important one. If we take the discussion and the focus away from Teesta Setalvad specifically, and the Supreme Court has made it very clear that in her case, the Gujarat High Court should have heard her bail plea earlier. The merits of the case will still be decided. The process will go on. But the point that Justice Dhingra is making about this perception that the rich, the famous, the influential seem to be getting a hearing at the top court when it's not the same for the ordinary Indian. And I spoke earlier about the large number of under trials who are languishing, who don't have any hope. Many of them are uneducated, many of them are illiterate. And their cases, their stories are not in the spotlight at all. Do you think that that is a very clear point that needs to be addressed, Mr. Gonsalves?
Yes, I agree with Justice Dhingra that it needs to be addressed, that there are many poor people who need to be released on bail. I agree with that. But that doesn't detract from the present case of Teesta Setalvad, who may be famous, but she's certainly not rich. But she's fighting for a cause. She's fighting for justice against a very powerful government that has been able to bend the law in its favor. And that the Supreme Court today took up the case is a laudable thing. And I must say, the manner in which it was taken up, the questions they asked the government counsel, and their clear thinking on the subject that they will not allow a high court to keep a lady in jail and adjourn the matter for 5 weeks. That was a grievous wrong, and I think the Supreme Court has corrected that in a day. And that is the way the Supreme Court ought to do justice And even though it may not have been done in other instances, I'm happy that today the Supreme Court has set a wonderful example to tyrannical governments to tell them, you might be a very powerful government, but we will not allow you to keep a human rights activist in jail like this, even for a day more. I applaud the Supreme Court.
Justice Dhingra, your response to that?
See, the Supreme Court is very good, very powerful when it grants, bail to Teesta Setalvad. The Supreme Court is so callous, so negligent, so ignorant of thousands of people languishing in jail, not for 1 month or 1 year, but years together, waiting for their hearing in the Supreme Court that their turn will come. They don't have crores of rupees as collected by Teesta Setalvad in the name of NGO and spent on herself, mopped up the money, spent on herself, on her husband's
That's an allegation, Justice Dhingra. That's an allegation that is still being, investigated. Should we not clarify that, sir?
I disagree. The government is not powerful in this country. The government is not that powerful in this country. It is only Supreme Court and a lobby of advocates which is powerful in this country. Otherwise, see, this Supreme Court would have just dispensed justice with equal hand to every common man and poor person of this country. If the Parliament had been powerful, Parliament would have told Supreme Court, you have no business to give priorities to rich, famous and powerful people. Please conduct your proceedings in accordance with law, giving everybody fair opportunity to
Sir,
be
Justice
heard.
Dhingra, you're a former judge, sir. With due respect, what kind of a democracy would we be if elected representatives can dictate to the courts? The judiciary has its own role, sir, in our democracy and in preserving our democracy.
I think you should read the Constitution. You should read the Constitution. Parliament is supreme. Parliament is able to make law. It is the weakness of the Parliament.
But can Parliament choose who the Supreme Court listens to?
Told the Supreme Court that you should do even-handed justice.
No, okay, Colin Gonsalves, can you respond to this? Because the primary concern seems to be that if you have money, if you have the wherewithal to reach the Supreme Court, you will get justice. If you're a poor, illiterate person who doesn't have the money, you will be languishing for years and nobody will care. And that, I think, is a fair point. Apart from the Teesta Setalvad case, that's a valid point and that's a valid concern.
Well, of course, it's a valid point that people who have money manipulate the system. And of course, it's a valid point that the Supreme Court and our judiciary generally has not been able to draw the correct balance so that the poor get justice. Everyone should get justice, of course, but the poor languishing in jail, Justice Dhingra has made a correct point that they're languishing in jail for a long, long time. But it is not true that in India, Parliament is supreme. Countries with constitutions mean the Constitution is supreme, and the interpretation of the Constitution is the court. And therefore, what is supreme in the country is the rule of law by the courts. Therefore, a tyrannical judgment like we have now in Delhi, central government, the tyrannical judgment is not supreme. Parliament is not supreme. It's the rule of law which is supreme. Right. And tyrannical governments, even though they have huge power,
but the question is the rule of law evenly applied to all Indian citizens?
Not at all. You're right. And what Justice Dhingra said is right. I don't see how it's particularly relevant to a discussion on Teesta, but the law is never applied uniformly. The law is always applied against the poor, and the Supreme Court is at fault
By the way, the Supreme Court, in a number of observations, has also talked about the fact that there are too many under trials. They have, expressed concern. They've said jails in India are flooded with under trial prisoners. The statistics placed before us would indicate that more than 2/3 of the inmates of the prison constitute under trial prisoners. So there is concern over this. We can hope that the system is improved in a comprehensive fashion, and starting from the Supreme Court and downwards as well, because everyone doesn't have the wherewithal to reach the Supreme Court. As that may be, today the focus on Teesta Setalvad and that interim bail. Does the story end here? Possibly not, because the Gujarat High Court will still hear her bail plea on their set date. The Supreme Court made it very clear that this is interim bail. So that process will be followed, and we'll continue to track that story. For now, I want to thank Colin Gonsalves and Justice Dhingra for joining us on the show.